Just imagine that you're 14 years old and the whole tennis world is calling you the next champion. Every shot you play is loved by millions around the world. But suddenly, you disappear from the sport, shocking tennis fans all over the world. In today's video, we will discuss the story of tennis prodigies who seemed destined for greatness, but instead, they disappeared. Some of them walked away at their peak, while the others were forced out by injury, mental health struggles, or personal issues. Jennifer Capriati. First of all, let's start with one of the most heartbreaking stories in tennis history. Jennifer Capriati, a former American tennis player, is a name that should have been mentioned alongside Serena Williams and Steffi Graf as one of the greatest of all time. Instead, it became a nightmare for many. It was the year 1990. Capriati was just 14 years old when she turned professional. Within months, she got ranked in the top 10 inches of the world. Interestingly, the tennis world had never seen anything like it. But amidst the flashes of victory, that's where the story took a dark turn. Being in the spotlight, the pressure was immense on her, and her every tournament, every interview,
match point for Martina Hingis,
carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire nation on her shoulders. So just 3 years after turning pro, she was struggling with the weight of expectation. And then, in 1994, something shocking happened. Capriati was arrested for marijuana possession. During the search operation, police said they found an undetermined amount of marijuana in her hotel room in Florida. This damaged her reputation and her public image, and even many wrote her off as a burned-out prodigy. So, by 1995, Capriati had disappeared from professional tennis and mainstream media. So, once a fiery player who was destined to dominate the sport for decades was gone, she took a long break that many thought would be permanent. But here's what makes Capriati's story unique. She actually came back. After years of personal struggles, therapy, and finding herself again, she returned to win 3 Grand Slam titles. But imagine if she hadn't. Imagine if the pressure of being a prodigy had consumed her completely. For many others, that's exactly what happened. Todd Lay. Another story of a prodigy who disappeared is an Australian player whose name you've probably never heard, but whose story is interesting. Todd Lay, a tennis prodigy whose talent was challenged only by his personal issues. He had everything from natural talent to powerful strokes, and the kind of ability that coaches talk about discovering. But there was something else pumping beneath the surface, something that would ultimately prove more powerful than any forehand or serve. As Lay himself would later write in his honest memoir, alcoholism was better than tennis. So let's think about that statement for a moment. He was a young man so talented that he could have competed with the best players in the world, and yet he chose alcohol over his tennis career. What an irony. But besides this, he disappeared from professional tennis due to injuries, physical grind, and financial realities. But if we dig deep, it wasn't really a choice to disappear, was it? Lay's story reveals the darker side of tennis
somewhere
culture,
to be able to say
the pressure,
some things
the isolation,
speak
the
about
constant
a lot
travel,
of the
and the mental health struggles that often go unnoticed.
common occurrences that I've
For him, alcohol became an escape from a world that demanded more when he was barely old enough to understand what that meant. But honestly speaking, Lay's disappearance from tennis wasn't sudden. Rather, it was a gradual decline that those around him watched helplessly. His training sessions became irregular. Matches were lost not due to lack of skill, but due to lack of focus and preparation. Eventually, the tennis world simply moved on without him. Amanda Anisimova. But that's not the story of Lay that puts people in shock and questions players' choices and concerns. Let's talk about a challenge the tennis world has only recently begun to acknowledge openly, which is the mental health of the players. For decades, players were expected to be mentally bulletproof. If they show any weakness, then they're out. But if you are struggling with anxiety or depression, then you'd better keep it to yourself. Another modern tennis player to disappear mysteriously is Amanda Anisimova, M.A., a rising American star who shocked the tennis world in 2023 with a simple but powerful statement. "I'll be taking an indefinite mental health break from tennis after finding being at tournaments unbearable." Anisimova wasn't a common veteran looking for an excuse. She was 21 years old, ranked in the top 30 inches of the world, and had just reached the Australian Open semi-final. She was living the dream that millions of young players aspire to, and yet, she walked away. But what's truly remarkable about Anisimova's story is that she survived it. In 2024, she returned to tennis, stronger and more resilient than ever. She reached 2 Grand Slam finals and proved that taking care of your mental health isn't career suicide and might actually save your career. Not only that, Anisimova recently reached the 2025 US Open final, facing Aryna Sabalenka. So, while suddenly disappearing due to personal issues, Anisimova made her way back. But for every Amanda Anisimova who finds her way back, how many others disappear completely? Now, let's examine one of the most common reasons prodigies disappear, and that is injury. But we're not talking about a simple twisted ankle or pulled muscle. We're talking about career-ending injuries that strike at the worst possible moment. Robin Soderling. After Anisimova, another tennis superstar to disappear suddenly is Robin Soderling, yes a name that should ring bells for any tennis fan. The Swedish delivered one of the most shocking upsets in tennis history when he defeated Rafael Nadal at Roland Garros in 2009. Yes, he beat the king of clay Nadal at the French Open. After that victory, Soderling looked unstoppable. He reached another French Open final in 2010, reached to number 4 inches the world rankings, and was motivated for Grand Slam glory. On the other hand, the tennis world had found its newest superstar. But after that, nothing happened. By 2011, Soderling began experiencing severe fatigue, dizziness, and anxiety attacks during matches. What started as occasional symptoms became constant, worsening health issues that no doctor could properly diagnose or treat. In short, Soderling's disappearance from tennis wasn't a choice, it was a medical mystery. Some speculated it was mononucleosis, others suggested anxiety disorders, but no one could tell exactly what was wrong. All they knew was that one of the most promising players in the world could no longer compete and cherish the fans on court. By 2012, Soderling had played his last professional match. The man who had conquered Nadal on clay was forced to watch from the sidelines as his peers competed for the titles he should have been winning. His ranking plummeted, his sponsorships disappeared, and eventually, the tennis world moved on. So, his story highlights a brutal truth about professional sport, which is that your body can betray you at any moment. After that, enters Mario Ancic, a Croatian former tennis player who reached the world number 7 ranking in 2006. Not only that, he won 3 singles titles and 5 doubles titles on his ATP tour. Mario Ancic. Ancic arrived with everything: a ferocious serve, quick hands at net, and a fearless court personality that showed promising success at the highest level. As a young man, he beat top opponents at majors, crossed into the top 10, and looked built for the long term on the court. The nickname Super Mario fit easily on him due to his dashing personality. After all this, it was just a matter of time and fate that he contracted mononucleosis, a viral condition that can shatter energy reserves, wreck stamina, and leave long-term effects on an athlete's body. Unlike a torn ligament, mono doesn't fix itself with an operation and 6 months of rehab. It's a slow wear and tear that ends the core resource of any elite athlete. Due to this illness, Mario's career became fragmented by fits and starts. Every return to fitness was followed by another relapse, another forced break, another recalibration. What looks on paper like an unfortunate early retirement is actually a painful story of a body that refused to keep pace with a sport that demands constant power, output, and recovery. Ancic's disappearance from the top charts of professional tennis wasn't a moral failing or a lack of talent, it was a medical reality. He moved on to a life outside the Pro Tour, skilled in other pursuits, but the what if never disappears for fans. His case stands as a reminder that health decides careers as talent does. Another player to disappear suddenly from professional tennis is Jelena Dokic. Jelena Docic's early results were excellent. She was a teenager who played with the ferocity and tactical maturity of a seasoned pro, stunning veterans of majors and the drain lights on. Her highest ranking in the professional ranks was world number 4 inches 2002. Her stance should have been a straight climb. Instead, it became a series of starts and stops. For her, the disruption was personal and brutal. Behind the on-court flashes, she faced a pattern of emotional and physical abuse from her father, who was her coach. And she faced it all from someone who should have protected her. The toxicity and the instability of a family situation that prioritized control and results over a child's well-being broke the foundations necessary for steady professional growth. When your primary relationship is a battlefield, the cognitive and emotional space to train, travel, and compete collapses. Docic's career included moments of brilliance. She even reached the top 5, but was repeatedly backstabbed by withdrawals, disappearances, and painfully public opinions about the cost of her upbringing. Then, her talent and testimony added an important public dimension to the conversation about athlete welfare, which is that fame doesn't protect you, and a national spotlight can sometimes unclear the worst private damage. Dokic's disappearances over the years were not a rejection of the sport, but a human call for safety and recovery. Her story forced fans and federations to acknowledge that talent cannot grow in an abusive ecosystem. As we are discussing the disappearance of tennis prodigies, it is important to note that not all disappearances are permanent. Some of tennis's most inspiring stories come from players who vanished from the sport only to return stronger than ever. Mardy Fish. Moving forward, we already mentioned Jennifer Capriati's remarkable comeback, but let's look at another inspiring example, Mardy Fish, the former American #1, whose story shows both the dangers of pressure and the possibility of return. Fish reached the peak of his career in 2011, climbing to number 7 inches the world rankings. He was finally achieving everything he'd worked for since childhood. But success came with a price that nobody saw coming. Behind the scenes, Fish was struggling with severe anxiety and panic attacks. The pressure of maintaining his ranking, combined with the physical demands of professional tennis, created a perfect storm of mental health issues. Fish's symptoms became so severe that he couldn't even enter tennis courts without experiencing debilitating panic attacks. The sport that had defined his entire life suddenly became his biggest fear. Fish essentially disappeared from tennis in 2013, retiring from professional play to focus on his mental health. For many fans, it seemed like a premature end to a promising career. But Fish's story was far from over. Instead of letting his struggles destroy him, Fish became an advocate for mental health awareness in professional sports. He underwent therapy, medication, and gradually rebuilt his relationship with tennis. While he never returned to professional play, he found new purpose as a coach and mental health spokesperson. Fish's story proves that disappearing from tennis doesn't have to mean disappearing from life. Sometimes stepping away is exactly what's needed to find your way back to who you're supposed to be. Ana Konju. After that, Ana Konju enters. She was once hailed as Croatia's next big tennis star and a junior Grand Slam champion with powerful ground strokes, incredible timing for her age, and the kind of baseline game that had commentators predicting she would be a permanent fixture in the top 20. By 19, she had already reached the quarterfinals of the 2016 US Open, defeating then world number 4, Agnieszka Radwanska, in a dramatic match that showed her fearless hitting and a complete aura under pressure. Even tennis analysts saw her as part of the sport's future. Besides all this, her rise was suddenly interrupted by a series of serious elbow injuries that became the defining challenge of her career. The elbow, which is like the backbone of a tennis player's game, repeatedly broke down at the worst possible times. Unlike a single injury that can be repaired and rehabilitated, Konju faced a cruel cycle. This cycle consisted of multiple surgeries, long rehabilitation periods, and constant setbacks each time she tried to return. Between 2017 and 2020, she had to go through at least 4 elbow surgeries. Every surgery was done to treat recurring issues, but it also forced her off the tour for months at a time. So every time she returned, it proved to be short-lived. Every return was short-lived. She tried to show glimpses of her old brilliance and to appease happy fans with her potential, but the consistency and match fitness needed to compete at the top level never gave her enough room to survive. Nicole Vaidishova. Another top player to suddenly disappear from professional tennis is Nicole Vaidishova.
That semifinal before went over 2 hours, so both these players very antsy, ready to take the court, and really finishing points from the net.
And reached the semifinals of the Australian Open and French Open before she was even 18. For a time, she was predicted by analysts as a future Grand Slam champion. But her career took a shocking turn when, at just 20 years old, she retired suddenly in 2010, leaving fans shocked. The reasons behind her disappearance were a complex mix of burnout, loss of motivation, and personal struggles. Vaidishova had turned professional at 15 and spent nearly her entire adolescence under the constant pressure of travel, training, and media attention. According to her own statement, she began to lose the passion to compete, and that eventually kept her away from the beauty and grind of the sport. On top of that, wrist and shoulder injuries blocked her progress, making it even harder to sustain the momentum expected of her. Some critics also pointed to outside distractions and her early marriage to fellow Czech player Radek Štěpánek as factors that shifted her focus away from tennis. Although she attempted a comeback several years later, the long break and physical setbacks prevented her from regaining her former level. In the end, Nicole Vaidishova's sudden disappearance from tennis was less about a single dramatic event and more about the emotional and physical exhaustion that comes from peaking too early in a sport that demands complete devotion. The ground realities of why so many tennis players disappear. After discussing the sudden disappearance of so many young prodigies, let's analyze why some of them just walk away and never make a comeback. To understand why so many tennis prodigies disappear, we need to examine where they're created. Well, the first pinpoint in this analysis is the role of tennis academies. These institutions promise to turn talented children into professional champions, but at what cost? You see, at elite tennis academies around the world, children as young as 8 years old train 6 to 8 hours per day. They're separated from their families, their friends, their normal childhood experiences, and they do all this to achieve tennis excellence. On top of that, their schedule is brutal, from 6 a.m. wake-up calls to fitness training to technical practice to match play, and many more. So for them, weekends don't exist, holidays are training camps, and eventually, their childhood becomes just a goal of attaining athletic perfection. Then there is another harsh reality that so many tennis players have to face in professional tennis, which is the financial position. This might be the #1 reason why promising players suddenly disappear from the sport. Just imagine that you're 18 years old, ranked around 300 inches the world, which, by the way, means you're one of the 300 best tennis players on the planet. Sounds impressive, right? Here's the reality. You're probably losing money every single month. Yes, you have to pay for travel costs, coaching fees, equipment, tournament entry fees, and accommodation. In short, a player ranked outside the top 100 might spend $150,000 per year just to compete, while earning only $50,000 in prize money. To put it simply, you're going bankrupt while achieving your dream. But here's the disturbing truth. Most of these children will never make it. This financial pressure creates a vicious cycle. Players become desperate for results, which leads to poor decision-making, increased pressure, and often, injury or burnout. Eventually, many talented players simply can't afford to continue their careers, regardless of their potential. So, where does this leave us? Is the tennis world learning from these seldom nightmares, or are we ignorant enough to keep losing promising young athletes to the same systemic problems? The tennis world will continue to produce prodigies and great players like it always has. Some will achieve greatness, others will disappear. What do you think? Should the tennis world do more to protect young athletes, or is this pressure simply the price of dreaming of greatness? Let us know.